Hello once again, it's Matthew here from MatthewNorthMusic. Thank you for watching today's video. And as ever, if you like the kind of videos I make, be them about music, electronics or something in between, please think about subscribing to the channel because it really does help the channel to grow. And if you click the little bell icon, then you'll be notified each time a new video is uploaded. And if you like this video or any of my other videos, give us a like, share us on social media. All these things really do help and it's all absolutely free. Now, today's video is about this. This is a Marshall Valvestate 40. Now, I featured a Marshall Valvestate on the channel before because it's actually been one of my most successful videos. That was about a Valvestate 80. Well, this is the Valvestate 40. Now, there's not a huge difference between the two other than this amp is lower power. It's 40 watts. It's physically not as big, so therefore it's a little bit lighter. Now, the reason I bought this amp is that I do a lot of gigs where I don't necessarily want to take big heads, cabs, stuff like that. And I want something small, but with a bit of volume. And I think this might do the trick. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to plug it in, show you around it, and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we're going to get it up and running. And then possibly I might do a little bit of modification to it as well. So the first thing I'll do then is I'll take you around the amp. This is the amp then, and the control panel, as you can see, is on the front. You also get with one of these a little channel change foot switch like that plugs into the front, just a single on-off switch, and that just swaps the two channels. So working from left to right then, we have our clean channel first. Now this has gain, bass, middle and treble. Gain, otherwise known as volume, because it doesn't actually have a master volume control as such. So I think this probably is just to hang on, just to call it gain, but really it should be called volume. Now this channel is completely solid state. Everything from this is solid state all the way through the circuitry to the speaker. As we move along then, we've got the boost button, which is also the channel change button. And then we've got our overdrive channel. Now here we've got a gain control, a contour control, which is like a sort of mid-sweep EQ, bass and treble, and our master volume. Now, the way this channel works is the signal comes through here, it goes through a preamp, a solid state preamp, that also acts as kind of like an overdrive. That then goes into the valve part of the amplifier, and then comes out the valve and goes into the power amp. So it's kind of it sort of overdrives the valve a bit with its own gain, but it also has a bit of overdrive itself. Then over here we've got our reverb control. So the reverb control is just on the master reverb. Interestingly, I don't know if you can use a different version of the foot switch to turn the reverb on and off like you do on the Valvestate 80. Possibly, I don't know. But the foot switch that came with this just has a mono jack plug on the end of it that you can see here, but if it had a stereo jack plug then it could have two switches, so not 100% sure. We've then got our effects loop here, preamp out, power amp in, we've got a line output, and we've got the foot switch socket and our on-off power switch. The back of the amplifier is just the back of an amp really. It's just got our IEC main socket and it's got a Celestion G12L speaker. Now this is quite important. It says it's a 40 watt amp into 4 ohms. So it uses a 4 ohm speaker, which is not that common really. Normally you'd have 8 or 16, but it's a 4 ohm. But if you were to have it running an 8 ohm speaker, it's not going to cause a lot of problems. It's just going to be a little bit quieter, that's all. Well then, here's our amp. I've got my guitar here and I've just plugged it in and I'm going to switch it on and see what happens. So let's put the power on. And yeah, I can hear a hum. Oh dear. No sound. Let's try the overdrive channel. We're getting a bit of sound, but not very much. Now, what could this be? Well, I've got a hunch. And what I'm going to do first is there's a method of testing things, and we call it the half split method. And this is kind of something I learned when I was at college. And what that is, you look at the path of a signal and you go into the middle and you establish whether the fault is either after the middle or before the middle. And on a guitar amp like this, we have a middle, and it's called the effects loop. Now what I mean by this is, the preamp out is connected to the power amp in, internally. When you put a jack plug in, then it disconnects that. So what it basically means is, all of this goes to that socket, and then it's linked to this socket, and then it goes to the amplifier. So what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to unplug my guitar, and I'm going to plug it into the power amp input. And it's interesting. So the power amp input actually goes into the reverb and then into the power amp. That's interesting, but you can hear that works. Now if I plug this back in, this may work, it may not now. No, we've got nothing. So what can the problem be? Well, here's a way of testing. If you get a normal jack to jack cable and you plug it in between the preamp out and the power amp in, so we'll go into the preamp out first, power amp in, and we've got signal. Let's go to the overdrive channel. So we've got a bit of crackle, but we have got signal. So what is causing this? Well, if I unplug this, I will tell you. The problem is, with Valvestate amps, and I've seen this on a number of Valvestates now, the sockets get a bit corroded, a bit mucky, and because the signal goes through the one socket and into the next one and then into the next stage of the amp, and you interrupt it by putting in a jack plug, then if it's not connected properly, there's like sort of like metal bars, and they sort of go down like that, and when the jack plug is pushed in, it pushes the bars up and connects it to the bars. But in that position, then if a bit of corrosion, signal won't get through, and that's why the signal wasn't getting through to go into this stage of the amp. Now, as I say, a temporary fix, if you're on a gig, you're using one of these, it's just to stick a jack to jack cable in, or a patch cable or something, that'll be fine. In fact, you can leave it and it'll work for yonks. But what we're going to do is, we're going to take the amp out of the cabinet, and we're going to have a good look, because I think some of these pots are definitely a bit scratchy, a bit, yeah, not very good. So it all needs a good clean inside. I mean, this amp's nearly 30 years old, so what we'll do is we'll get the tools out and take the top off, and we'll have a look. Well then, that was pretty easy. It was just 4 screws holding the chassis in, and we've now got the chassis out, so we'll have a closer look inside. If we look across here, I can give you a rough guide of what we've got. So we start over this side. This is our power supply section here. And in here, you can probably just see just there, that's a step-up transformer. And what that does, it takes the AC from the mains transformer, which is mounted to the bottom of the chassis, and that steps it up to about 300 volts, maybe 330. And that's to feed the plates of the preamp valve here. So there's going to be another set of rectification somewhere that then turns the DC into AC, the AC into DC, and that feeds that valve. And there's these capacitors here, and these big chunky resistors here. They're all part of the power and whatnot for the preamp valve. The power amplifier itself is this. It's just this little IC here, and then we've got some other components here. If we start on this side, we've got our preamp section here. So there's an IC for that. It's probably a dual op amp of some sort. We've then got our overdrive section here. So this bit here is effectively like an overdrive pedal, because you've got a couple of LEDs there, and they're what clip the signal. So that's like an overdrive pedal. That then feeds the valve. There's some diodes here actually. That's all part of the valve's power supply section, I think. And then that feeds the valve, and then it comes out of here and it all goes off to the power amp. Now I've got another IC here. I think this one is what drives the reverb tank, which is here. So the reverb's actually inside the cabinet rather than being in sort of the bottom of the cabinet on separate cables like a lot of reverb units are on amps. And yeah, and so that's the inside of the amp. So it's all fairly compact, fairly simple. And yeah, this is our mains transformer here. And that's all there is to it. Now if we look under here, if you can just about see, there's our jack sockets. Now what I will do is I'll put a jack plug into it so it lifts up these switches, if you like. I can then get some contact cleaner in there and hopefully clean those up. Possibly even use a little bit of sandpaper. And all our pots along here, they've all got a little gap in the back of them. So what we can do there is we can squirt contact cleaner in, and hopefully we will then get a proper signal with no clicks and bumps. So let's get on with cleaning that. So things like the pots, then we can just give it a little squirt with some contact cleaner. And turn the pot a few times, and hopefully that will just get enough into to clean it. Now if it isn't that good, then we may need to take the whole board out and squirt it from the other side, but I've usually found it works okay this way. Okay, the amp's out the cabinet at the moment, but we've cleaned all the pots, so I'm going to plug the guitar in now and see if we get any sound. And we do, although when you turn it right down to the bottom, there's a bit of leakage, so I'm wondering if we've got a bit of a dry joint somewhere. It's possible, but no crackle on the bass, no crackle on the middle, no crackle on the treble. So yeah, that channel's good. So let's go to the overdrive channel now. So press the boost button. Don't like this big DC thud I get on the channel change. I don't quite know what's causing that. And again, we've got our, so we've got no crackle at all. So yeah, we don't. So yeah, we haven't really got much in the way of anything between sort of a sort of bluesy warm tone and sort of full on metal. But you know, what does it sound like on metal? So yeah, it's really good for that sort of high gain. So yeah, that's working okay. I'm really pleased with that, and reverb should still be okay. Now let's just try our foot switch again, because I've cleaned the foot switch jack as well, so hopefully this should... Oh yeah, you need to have the channel actually on. Yeah, it's not always changing, but that could be... Yeah, it could be something to do with the foot switch itself. In fact, if I just get our foot switch, I'm just going to squirt some contact cleaner right into the switch, because sometimes this is usually enough to do it. And yeah, it is. There we go. Yeah, our foot switch is all now working, and our amp's working. And yeah, it's not a bad sounding amp. I'm just going to give you a couple of little sound demos now. Let's go on the clean channel first. I'll turn the reverb off for now, and so we've got a fairly respectable clean sound with everything kind of in the middle. If I turn the bass up a bit, it's a little bit warmer. So yeah, it's not bad clean sound. But it could be warmer, I think. And I've got an idea about that, which I'm going to mention in a minute, as I said. Now, if we go onto the overdrive channel, then I'm going to turn the gain right down. And then we've got the bass up quite loud, we've got the contour in the middle. Let's just stick them all in the middle for now. And that's giving you a fairly good sort of 70s rock sound. And if I turn the gain up a bit, I'm going to turn the master volume down because it's going to be quite loud. So yeah, that's nice, more of a meaty sound. And if I wind down the gain on the guitar a bit, so it sounds a bit thinner, but again, it's still very sort of trebly, and I think that's kind of how guitar tones were in the early 90s. It was sort of grunge, it was metal, it was Metallica, it was Nirvana, and they wanted a sort of a brighter sort of sound. But if I turn the bass right up, and we are getting a bit more of that sort of classic Marshall sort of 70s tone. And again, if I turn the contour down a bit, and again, that does improve things a little bit. I'm actually going to knock some of the treble down. Again, so that's getting us even closer now to the kind of sounds that we wanted. Now I'm going to whack the volume down a bit, and I'm going to whack the gain up a lot more. And now we kind of want a bit more treble now, a bit less bass, because we're into sort of high gain territory, so we're more going sort of... So yeah, we're getting a nice big fat rock metal sound out of this, and yeah, I think it sounds brilliant. Again, if I turn it down a bit to more my sort of signature sort of blues sound, and stick a bit of reverb on. And yeah, I think that's actually given me a pretty decent sound. And for me, it's a no-brainer, because I could now take this amp, obviously with a chassis back in the cabinet, but I could take this amp and I could go and play a gig with it. I wouldn't need to take any pedals with me, and I would be more than happy using this really rather good sounding amp that's, you know, must be getting on 30 years old. Let's have a look at the date code on Transformers. 9207, so July 1992 this amp was actually made. Now, as I said, I've got one thing I want to try on this, and it's this. What makes the sound of an amp different? Is it changing the valves? No. Is it, if it's a solid state amp, is it changing transistors? No. It's all about the speaker. It's all about the loudspeaker. That is what makes most difference in your guitar tone. If you don't believe me, go over to Glenn Fricker's channel and watch one of his videos about it, because he demonstrates very well that by changing the speaker, you change the tone. Now, if I've got one of my favourite cabinets, which would probably be my Marshall 4x12 with greenbacks in it, if we're playing clean, I could use a solid state GP amp, I could use my Electro Harmonics little caliber 22 amplifier, or I could use my Plexi. At clean tone, they all kind of sound the same. There's not a huge amount of difference. But if I was to use one amp and put it through some different speakers, then they're all going to sound different. So what I want to have on this amp is I want to have something a bit more mellow, a little bit warmer. And so I've gone for getting a replacement speaker. Well then, you're probably looking at pictures now of me unboxing this loudspeaker. Now this loudspeaker I got from Lean Business, who I've been buying speakers from for quite a number of years. There's nothing special about why I use them. They just always seem to have stuff in stock. Now, I'm not affiliated in any way to them, but I just thought I'd give them a shout out because I've always had good service from them. Anyway, the speaker in question, as you can probably see, is a Celestion, but it's not actually a Celestion greenback. Now, greenbacks, as I say, they're speakers that I like using a lot, but they're not the speaker that I've got today. What I've actually got is this, which is a Celestion creamback. Now, the reason I bought a creamback is because they have more power than a greenback. So you can get up to 65 watts at 8 ohms into this speaker. But I actually do use a creamback in a 1x12 cab that I use with my El Pico amplifier, which I've done a video about in the past. And you know, the sound between a creamback and a greenback is not a huge difference, but it's the sound I like. And I think this is probably the most suitable speaker I could get to go in this Valvestate. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Valvestate is actually 40 watts into 4 ohms. And this is an 8 ohm speaker, so we're going to have a power loss. Off the top of my head, I don't think it's half. I don't think it's going to be 20 watts, but it's probably going to be something like 25, 28 watts or something that we will get. So it's not going to be as loud, but then I don't need to run this amp flat out anyway, so it should be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this fitted in the cabinet and then we'll have a listen. To kind of get at all of this, there's actually only 4 screws holding the cabinet in, but we can't really get to the bottom 2. So what we need to do is we need to remove this panel here, because this is actually going to then let us get to the other 2 screws that hold this speaker in. So we take this out, and now we've got access to the 4 screws. Now we can probably see, if we get the our new speaker out, you can see that the magnets are much bigger. I mean, even though this one's got a cover, the magnet is much bigger than the one that's on here. So that's an indication that these speakers are obviously going to be a lot different. But in essence, they should just be replaceable. All I need to do is to take those 4 screws out and then pop this in place. There we go there. Now our creamback is neatly fitted in the cabinet, and that literally took no more than a couple of minutes. So what we'll do now is we'll put the amp all back together and then we'll give it a test. Well, this isn't completely scientific, but I've got the speaker in the amp, I've got the mic pretty much in the same spot that it was in. I know if I move it a slight little bit, it could make a difference. But like on my tests, the mic's just going straight into the camera. So what I can do is I can kind of compare this a little bit with what I was doing earlier. So I'll edit a couple of clips together, and then you can kind of get a different idea of the sound. But we've now got the cream back in anyway, so this is kind of the clean sound. And to me, that's a much more mellow, much warmer sounding speaker. Yeah. I know they say, oh, you only hear with your eyes, but to me that does sound much better. Now if we go into our overdrive channel, now I'll just turn the gain down a little bit. And if you remember, I had to turn the bass right up, and I turned the contour to there. And I took out some of the treble. Now to me now, that sounds way too bassy for me, even with... So we need to bring the treble back up. Yeah, I've still got a little bit of crackle on that pot, but I think... it's stuff. So I might give that another spray actually. But yeah. Well, at the moment, that tone I'm getting, where most, in fact, I'll just stick everything in the center. So all our EQ is in the center. Well, I'm happy with that tone. I could play live with that tone. Now I couldn't do that with the old speaker in, it was too trebly, too bright. But right now we kind of have a pretty good sounding amp. And the great thing about these Valvestate 40s are you can pick them up really cheap. And when I say really cheap, I paid what the seller was asking for this on Marketplace and I got this for £30. I've seen two others on Marketplace, one was 60, one was 50. So these are an absolute bargain. And if you're prepared to upgrade the speaker with something that you prefer, like I said, I like the Creamback, but there's so many, there's Eminence makes some great speakers. I use an Eminence speaker in my Tweed Deluxe that I built, and that's a great sounding speaker. But for me, the Creamback in this sounds great. And the thing with the impedance thing is, some say, oh, you've got to have everything exactly matched. And that's correct, particularly with valve amplifiers, because the output transformer has to be balanced onto its load. With solid state, it's different and it's not so crucial. As long as there is a load on the output, most solid state amps that you buy, they normally say on the back what the minimum load is, the minimum impedance, and it's normally 4 ohms. And you know, whether it's a PA amp, keyboard amp, guitar amp, if it's solid state, it'll usually say what the load should be. And I've never seen an amp that says output impedance 4 ohms, do not put anything higher. So, you know, an 8 ohm speaker on a 4 ohm amp, fine, no problem. If it's a 4 ohm speaker and the amp says maximum load 8 ohm, then you might have a problem, because you'll be trying to draw more current out of the amp, and then you might start blowing up transistors. But no, this thing's absolutely fine. And in fact, what you could do by having an 8 ohm speaker on it, you could fit another speaker socket to run an extension speaker if you wanted to have 2 speakers. Now that way you could have another 8 ohm speaker, so you'd have two speakers, and they're 8 ohms in parallel. That's giving you 4 ohms, that's giving you the maximum load the amp can deliver. And I think that would sound pretty good. And in fact, I think if you did fit an extension speaker socket on here, you could even experiment and maybe have a break socket, so that when you plug the speaker in, it disconnects the internal speaker, and then you could try, you know, 4x12s, 2x12s, anything you like really, and just experiment with the sound that it makes. But anyway, for me, I think this amp is doing exactly what I wanted it to do. I wanted something for playing blues. You know, it's got a nice little reverb on it. In fact, just turn the reverb off. So yeah, I think it's a great amp, and they're cheap as chips. So if you want to get yourself a good guitar amp secondhand, don't have a high budget, I really would think looking for a Valvestate 40. And in fact, I think I like this amp more than I like the 80, just because it's smaller and lighter. And that obviously, when you're carrying gear and stuff, you don't want to do your back in. I mean, the 80 is great. It's a great amp and it's brilliant for metal and it's really loud. But sometimes you don't always need that power. And with this amp, you know, it delivers everything. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and if you do, as ever, please like, subscribe, share on social media, and if you don't follow me on Facebook, I'm Matthew North Music on Facebook as well. But anyway, for now, thanks for watching.